Hello, my name is Father Lawrence Jagdfeld. I am a Franciscan friar of the Sacred Heart Province, headquartered in St. Louis, and I am also the administrator of CUSA, an apostolate of persons with chronic illness and/or disability. The Gospel for today's Sunday comes to us from the Gospel of Luke, and again is a very familiar story. Jesus entered a village where a woman whose name was Martha welcomed him. She had a sister named Mary, who sat beside the Lord at his feet, listening to him speak. Martha, burdened with much serving, came to him and said, "Lord, do you not care that my sister has left me by myself to do the serving? Tell her to help me." The Lord said to her in reply, "Martha, Martha, you are anxious and worried about many things. There is need of only one thing. Mary has chosen the better part, and it will not be taken from her." We have to be careful when we read this gospel, because there is a tendency among some preachers, I have heard sermons anyway, that tend to bring our own particular sensitivities to this story, our own particular biases to this story. I have heard people use this story as a way to distinguish between the active life and the contemplative life. I've heard this story used to illustrate what St. Paul means by justification by faith or justification by works, Mary being the example of faith, Martha being the example of works. I've heard this story being used to compare and contrast Judaism and Christianity. I've also heard this story used to talk about women's priorities, women in the workplace, or women who stay at home. Some people have used this story as a way to talk about a woman's right to theological education on a par with men. And finally, I've heard some people use this story to justify the use of women at the altar in the Eucharistic action of the Church. Again, these are all 20th and 21st century biases that we bring to this gospel. And of course, we have to be sensitive to these issues, but I don't think that this gospel story is really meant to convey any of those messages. You might remember a few weeks ago, I talked about the linchpin or the change that takes place in the Gospel of St. Luke at chapter 9, when Jesus resolutely turned his face to Jerusalem. The Galilean ministry is over, and now Jesus is on his way to Jerusalem, where he will give his life for our sake. He's on his way to die. We know that Mary and Martha lived in Bethany, which is just a stone's throw from Jerusalem. So he is drawing closer. This is not to say that there are not many more stories to come in the gospel. This incident is not immediately before the Passion narrative. But we know that Jesus is on his way. We know that he is a man who is marked, upon whom the shadow of the cross has fallen, and he is on his way to die. And I ask you, if a person came to your home and told you that they were about to die, what would be your concern? What would be your priority? Would you be all hustle and bustle about providing that person with a festive meal, about setting the table, fixing his favorite dishes? Or would you simply sit with him and listen to him? Listen to his concerns, listen to his thoughts. Be present to that person. I really believe that that's what's going on in this gospel. Mary is sensitive to Jesus as a human being, as a man who is marked by death. Martha has failed to grasp that reality. Perhaps she, like the rest of the apostles, just does not think that any such thing could happen. You might remember that when Jesus told his disciples about his impending death, they remonstrated with him, and he said, "Get behind me, Satan." Martha doesn't say these words, but by her activity, she obviously is not too concerned about what's going to happen to Jesus. Again, I think that what Luke is really trying to teach us here is the virtue of compassionate listening, of compassionate understanding, of being with and being present to the person rather than being concerned about things, about what we have to do. This really is a very important lesson for us, especially those of us who are so filled with the Western culture of productivity and work. We tend to forget that human beings are about more than what they do. We tend to forget that we must be present to the person as another human being. We tend to forget, in the words of last Sunday's Gospel, that we are to be looking at each other with compassion, with the love that comes from our hearts. As we listen to this story then, we can talk about the contemplative Mary, we can talk about the active Martha, but I would rather speak about concern for the individual, concern for the person, and what is happening in their lives. For even if we are visiting with a person who isn't facing imminent death, our focus should be on the person rather than on all of the things that surround that kind of visit. For more information about CUSA, please visit our website at www.cuson.org or visit us on Facebook.